The string quartet hushed mid-phrase, and the whispering got louder, like the room had grown a second mouth. Candlelight ran along the polish of the aisle like a thin slick of water. I adjusted my dress whites. Starch bit my wrists, metal braid cool against my collarbone, and I felt the familiar weight of the wedding ring nestled in my pocket. Not on my finger yet, like a promise I intended to keep. I stood at the altar in uniform, not satin, and in that bright hush I heard my aunt's hiss cut cleaner than any violin. "You look ridiculous. You should have worn something feminine." Laughter rippled, low and mean, around the front pews. It wasn't loud, but cruelty never needed volume. It needed an audience. My jaw held. My shoulders stayed square because the jacket fit like a second spine. I breathed in lilies and wax and hot camera bulbs, held the breath, let it out as evenly as we'd trained. I kept my eyes on Jason, steady, kind, his medic's hands folded, then back to the flag tucked by the choir loft. Uniform, ring, flag, my life in 3 clean lines. I'd chosen the whites because I earned them. I wasn't about to trade them for tulle just to soothe anyone's sensibilities about what a bride should look like. Yet the giggles landed like spit. A man near the back coughed. A child rustled a program. Patricia, my aunt, tilted her head like a judge about to pass sentence. I could smell her perfume, sharp and citrusy, the same one she wore to board meetings. She never came to my graduations, but she came to this to supervise posture. She leaned again, voice a razor. "Pipes and grease, Emily. Not marriage." I didn't look at her. I adjusted a button, one click of metal, and the sound rang like a tiny bell. I told myself not to speak, not to give the moment oxygen. I let the priest's book whisper as he turned a page. Through the stained glass, winter light broke in bars across the pews. I thought of seawater on steel, of midnight watches where silence meant the ship still lived. This room's silence meant something uglier, the thrill some people felt when a woman stepped out of costume. I saw my mother, Linda, small as she always made herself at family gatherings, eyes damp already. She'd practiced pushing words like proud through lips taught to fear conflict. Then there was the other gaze, Patricia's. It slid over my medals, over the clean line of the jacket, looking for somewhere to land a sneer. She'd run the family business like a parade she owned. She liked rules that came with mirrors. The priest cleared his throat, and even that sounded apologetic. The faint hum of the HVAC drifted across my knuckles. Jason flexed his fingers once, a quiet code from months on storm decks. "I see you. You're not alone." Then the main doors at the back of the chapel opened, hinges complaining with a long, honest groan. Every head turned. The quartet faltered for real this time. Wind pushed through the doorway and combed the candle flames. A tall figure in full Navy uniform stepped inside, hat under his arm. The sunlight behind him etched his outline in white fire. Leather soles met stone in measured taps. 1-2, 1-2, that pulled the room's pulse into order. I knew that gait before the face came into focus. Captain Ross Adler, my commanding officer. He walked the center aisle like a ship cutting wake. The scent of cold air rode in with him. It made the lilies smell sweeter and the room feel smaller. He stopped at the end of the aisle, faced me, and raised his hand. The salute snapped sharp enough to be a drumbeat. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady. "Permission to attend." A murmur, shocked, hungry, rolled across the room. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed, a fish discovering glass. Discovering. The priest looked to me. Protocol, even here, mattered. I felt the brass of the ring in my pocket press against my palm. Uniform, ring, 2 anchors. I returned the salute. Wrist straight, fingers together, and heard the tiny rasp of fabric at my shoulder seam. "Granted," I said. He lowered his hand and, without breaking eye contact, turned a fraction toward the rows of faces. Something like embarrassment, earned, prickling, moved across the first pew as starched suits recognized real authority. I stood as still as the masthead in my mind would in a storm. I could feel the salt rough sting of old missions under my skin and the starch-slick compression of today's jacket above it. 2 worlds touching, lit by the same candles. Captain Adler's presence changed the air pressure. Even the children seemed to breathe on his count. My aunt shifted, bracelet clinking, a little music of nerves. Her perfume sharpened, like citrus rinds crushed too hard. "We will continue," the priest said, attempting something like control. His voice wavered, then steadied. "We are gathered. We are gathered," Patricia cut in, too brightly, "to watch a bride pretend to be a groom." Her words dropped like stones in holy water. A hiss of fabric as guests sat forward. Someone laughed, short, guilty, and then regretted it when the captain's head turned. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Silence can be disciplinary if it's wearing the right shoulders. Jason's eyes found mine. He didn't flinch, didn't frown. Even here, even now, he let the quiet belong to us, not to them. He kept his hands folded so the tremor wouldn't start him telling me jokes to diffuse what didn't deserve diffusing. My ring warmed in my fist. I thought of how his hands smelled of antiseptic and coffee after long nights, of the soft rasp of his knuckles against my cheek when we'd finally made it off a helo flight that ran too hot and too long. I had chosen a partner who knew the difference between a costume and uniform. My family preferred costumes. "Brides wear white," Patricia murmured, leaning forward again as if the captain had simply been an interruption in her program. "Not this." Her hand fluttered toward my jacket. She didn't touch me. She didn't dare. But her nails traced the air like she was arranging flowers or firing staff. I saw my mother's hand reach for hers, then hover, then pull back. Fear and love caught in a handshake that never completed. I kept my voice level. "I earned this white." "White means purity, not grease," she said, lips barely moving. 6 words, each meant to bruise a different spot she'd charted years ago. Grease. As if the only thing on a ship that mattered was what could stain silk. As if lives didn't ride on valves and voltage, on hands that got dirty so men could come home clean. Heat rose under my collar, not anger so much as a current I had learned to ride rather than fight. I let it travel down my spine and out through my heels into the stone. "Patricia," my mother whispered at last, "please. Please." The family's favorite word for keep the peace, even if peace is a lie. The captain's jaw flexed once. He shifted only enough to see my aunt without breaking form. "Ma'am," he said to her, tone clipped and polite, colder than a steel bulkhead, "you are out of line." She blinked, like the word ma'am applied to her had never sounded so much like a warning. She straightened. Her bracelet chimed again, tiny bells announcing the end of something. She tilted her chin at me. "You always did forget your place." "I remembered it," I said, "and I chose it." I didn't need to add more. Words expand to fill the weakness of a case. The case I had came sewn and pinned and pressed, rank at my shoulder, record at my back. I let the room sit with that fact. Somewhere behind me, a camera shutter clicked, brittle as ice. The quartet's leader, poor man, lifted his bow and lowered it again, uncertain whether to soundtrack humiliation. The priest tried once more, voice thinner now. "Shall we proceed?" Before anyone could answer, the chapel doors sighed wider, and a gust ruffled the flag by the choir loft. The cloth lifted and settled, a slow heartbeat in blue and white and red. My chest echoed it. The scent of candle smoke braided with cold air and lilies, until my lungs felt rinsed. Patricia leaned back in, last attempt, voice a whisper that aimed to be a knife. "You'll regret this photo." She meant the uniform, the cameras, the way my face would look when she forced it into some shape called feminine later. A permanent record to show clients. A weapon disguised as family memory. I turned just enough so she could see that I wasn't hiding the ring in my hand. Gold warmed by skin. A circle that was promise, not prop. "The only record I keep," I said, "is service." Her mouth sharpened. Service to what? I let the question hover. It asked itself, really. Captain Adler's shoulders answered it without me. Jason's steady breath answered it. The flag's quiet lift answered it. My mother's wet eyes answered it. And somewhere inside me, the bitter taste of salt and smoke from a year ago answered it too. That answer would stay sheathed for now. The captain looked to the priest. "With your permission, Father," he said, "I'll take a seat." Each word landed with the ease of a hammer, knowing it was built to strike true. Of course, Dumps, the priest said, relief escaping before he could smooth it. He gestured toward the front pew on Jason's side. The cushion sighed as the captain sat, the leather creaking faintly. I finally slid the ring from my palm to my forefinger, feeling its round truth. Not yet. Not until vows. But I needed its touch to remind me what we were here to do, not what anyone else wished we were pretending to be. I tucked it back into my pocket, the fabric rasping softly against gold. Then, the priest said, breath steadying, let us begin. That was when a phone buzzed in the front row. Loud. In the fastidious quiet, it sounded like a mosquito amplified through a megaphone. Patricia fumbled, cheeks flushing, and silenced it with a tap that shook her bracelets. A few heads turned. A few mouths twitched. Even embarrassment has a smell. Hers came in sharp, hot bursts of citrus and nerves. I didn't smile. Control was its own salute. I lifted my chin and fixed my gaze on Jason, and the music started again, tentative at first, then full. The notes floated, light as veil fabric I'd never missed, and settled around the room like a benediction that belonged to everyone willing to be worthy of it. I felt the same calm I'd felt on steel decks when the storm roared and the ship held. My aunt could clack her bracelets and sharpen her tongue. The room had already learned a different tempo. My wedding would keep it. Behind me, the doors, still open to winter, let in one more shiver of cold air. It ran across my knuckles, cooling the heat there, and left goose flesh like braille. A message. Read this day as it is. We began. And I knew that the worst thing about a lie told in public is how polite people become while it hangs in the air. The truth had just walked in and taken a seat. It had not spoken its piece. Not yet. I felt the ring's weight in my pocket, and the room waiting, and I understood the insult wasn't over. Only interrupted. I hadn't been born into uniforms. My family wore money like weekend linens, pressed, perfumed, smug. The first time I told them I wanted to be an engineer, my uncle clinked a spoon against a crystal glass. The ping jumped around the dining room like a tiny alarm. Lemon roasted chicken steamed on fine china. The scent of thyme and butter rose warm and forgiving. Patricia dabbed her lips, eyes lit with a sportive correction. Engineers fix messes, she said. We hire fixers. I ran my thumb along the seam of my skirt, trying to borrow courage from a straight line. My mother's bracelet rattled once against her plate. She whispered, "We're proud." And the words felt like a secret she hoped wouldn't get caught. I learned early that our house had two volumes, brag or hush. The middle ground, earnest, made people uncomfortable. In that vacuum, Patricia's voice carried. She tossed labels like confetti, quick and adhesive. When the Navy recruiter shook my hand in a cafeteria that smelled of floor wax and French fries, I knew what it meant to be seen for capacity, not category. His handshake was firm, cool, and real. The flyer crackled in my grip. Patricia laughed when I showed her. Uniforms are costumes, she said. Play acting authority. Authority is responsibility, I said. She tilted her head. Responsibility is for staff. I took the ASVAB, aced the mechanical comprehension, and fell in love with diagrams that hummed. Metal had rules. Fire respected angles. Water told the truth about where it would go if you didn't listen. My father stayed out of it, adding salt to his food with the focus of a man who measured involvement in grains. At OCS the first night, the barracks sang with unfamiliar noise, boots thumping, lockers clanging, that midnight cough someone always tried to swallow and couldn't. The air held a chemical clean tang. I learned my body's own map, where grit hid, where fear sat, where resolve slept and woke. The uniform wasn't a disguise. It was a translation. I could feel my future in how the fabric resisted and then yielded as I moved. Later, when I first slid on dress whites, I stood in front of a mirror that smelled faintly of ammonia and thought, this is not borrowed. Patricia sent a card. Thick, embossed, heavy as a dare. Inside 4 words, don't forget our name. Don't forget. I pinned the card under a magnet beside my rack and wrote underneath on a Post-it. Earn mine. Years later, the ship's engine room gave me the kind of peace people pretend to find in spas. It wasn't quiet. The turbine whine stitched through steel, a metal animal breathing, but the logic soothed me. The heat slicked skin. The air smelled like hot dust and oil. I learned to listen with fingertips, to feel vibration in the soles of my boots. In that bright, brutal honesty, I met Jason. He came aboard with a medical kit that clicked when it closed, a tidy sound against the ship's loud heart. The first time he touched my wrist to tape a nick from a slipped wrench, his fingers were cool from sanitizer. He didn't say he admired a woman doing a man's job. He asked how much torque I liked on a stubborn flange, and then he watched me work like that answer mattered. He laughed like he respected oxygen, not attention. We played cards in a corner that smelled like coffee and tired socks. I learned his tells, the twitch of his jaw when he bluffed, the way he cleared his throat when he meant to say something he might regret. I told him once, low, "The sea teaches humility," and he nodded as if humility were a tool he'd carried all his life. When we decided to marry, it happened in a quiet pocket of noise, steel humming, a distant crash of waves. He slid a hardware store washer around my finger as a joke, and we both laughed at the clink of metal on metal. I wore it for a watch turn, felt its raw edge bite, and realized how a circle can teach you its shape. Later, he replaced it with a ring that fit, warm and true. I wore it under gloves, my private gleam. I told my mother first. The phone line carried her breath across miles, a soft hush like a sleeve over a mouth. "I'm happy, baby," she said, and I heard the wobble. "Patricia will have opinions." "Patricia always has opinions," I said. "I have a life." We chose uniforms for the ceremony, not as a stunt, but as a statement. We were equals in service and marriage. Fabric could tell that truth without us having to shout. When I typed the email to the family, venue, date, dress code, we added one line. "We'll be in dress whites." The replies arrived with little pings that made my kitchen sound like a pinball machine. My mother's was 3 sentences of joy, 3 of advice, and 1 of apology for what she knew would follow. Patricia's came last, late enough to feel deliberate. 7 words, no greeting. "Wear a gown. Don't embarrass the family." I stared at the screen while the refrigerator hummed. I could smell the sharp cut of sliced apples on the cutting board and the faint iron of my own blood from a paper cut. I typed back, "I wear what I earned." Her response arrived fast enough to prove she'd been waiting. "You're not a man," she wrote. "Play the part." Jason read it over my shoulder, his chest warm at my back. He said nothing for a beat, then, "We'll bring our own stage." The way he said we steadied something inside me that had never been steady at home. The week before the wedding, Patricia called. Her voice thinned over the line, a blade losing patience. "You fix toilets on a boat," she said. "White is for brides, not plumbers." "White is for honor," I said. "We don't do toilets." She sniffed, a small, prim sound, as if the phone carried scent. I imagined her office, eucalyptus candle, glass desk, walls lined with framed covers of magazines that praised quarterly growth. "Clients will be there," she said. "Consider optics." "Optics," I said. "Don't save lives in storms." She exhaled sharply. "Image is currency. Courage buys more." She made a sound that lived between scoff and laugh. "Courage won't buy you respect in this city." Respect had always been a thing she dispensed, not a thing she recognized when it walked in on its own 2 feet. I looked at the ring basking on the counter in a rectangle of afternoon sun. The metal drank light the way a deck drinks rain, no drama, just absorption. I met Captain Adler 2 tours before Jason. He came aboard with a posture that silenced nonsense. When he visited the engine room, he listened. He knew the sound an engine makes when pride wants to mask a bearing's cry. He asked questions that made me better. He taught me how to correct a superior without shaming him, and how to refuse a shortcut without preaching. He looked people in the eye and could tell if they slept well at night. At a change of command ceremony, he'd pressed a challenge coin into my palm. The coin was heavy, ridged, imprinting my skin with its edges. "For when truth needs weight," he'd said. I kept that coin by my ring on the nightstand before the wedding. Some nights I palmed one, then the other, and let the two metals teach each other their jobs. My family's world loved awards they could sponsor and applause they could schedule. Service made its own calendar, its own. A month before the ceremony, a storm off the Pacific had eaten an entire week of our sleep and spat us back with new grooves in our bones. We didn't speak of it at dinner parties, not because we were secretive, but because words are clumsy around heat and smoke and the precise choices that build a life you can stand inside. I never told them the details. They liked summaries they could turn into anecdotes. All I ever said in that house, smelling of lemon oil and floral candles, was, "It was a hard week." Patricia's smile would sharpen. "And what did you learn?" she'd ask, like I'd attended a seminar. I'd say, "That white is hard to keep clean." And she'd miss the point. When we mailed the invitations, I tucked a small card into Patricia's envelope. On it, a single sentence: "Dress uniforms are formal wear." A courtesy, not a plea. She texted back a photo of a couture gown, white and liquid as poured sugar. "This," the caption read, "is how you win the room." I held my dress whites lifted from their bag. The fabric felt cool and stern. The creases looked like decisions. The faint scent of starch rose clean and assertive. I imagined walking down an aisle lined with people who measured worth by reflection, and giving them a surface that reflected nothing back but themselves. It felt right. Jason tried on his own whites and laughed when a button popped and skittered across the floor, tapping baseboards. "Battle damage, it come out," he said. He sewed it back on with hands that had stitched skin in worse places, and the thread bit his finger. He sucked the tiny bead of blood and shrugged. "Costs something," he said. "Worth it." 2 nights before the wedding, my mother called past midnight. Her voice carried kitchen sounds, ice clinking in a glass, a cabinet door kissing wood. "She's stirring people up," she said low, "saying things." "What things?" I asked, but I knew. That you, that the Navy is demoting you." The last word came out like it had thorns. I let the silence sit just long enough to become a rebuke of those words living in any mouth that loved me. The refrigerator hummed. A neighbor's dog barked twice, distant. "It's a lie," I said, "and it won't matter." "It matters," she said, so soft I almost missed it. "It matters what they think. For you." "It matters what's true," I said. "For me." She sniffed, a small wet sound. "I'm proud," she said, and this time the word didn't wobble. "Even if I'm quiet. Quiet pride still counts. It just doesn't carry in rooms trained to amplify only the loudest." I thanked her, hung up, and stood by the window. The city outside smelled like rain on hot pavement. I watched the streetlight wash over the glass, a rectangle of gold crawling across my floor. In that slow glaze of light, the ring and the coin glowed side by side. Uniform, ring. Two truer vows than anything I'd ever heard my aunt make to any ideal but image. Patricia kept pushing. She called vendors. She hinted to guests. She sharpened the joke she'd make when I walked in, bride or groom, until it gleamed mean. She didn't know that some rooms aren't hers to arrange. On the morning of the wedding, as I buttoned the jacket and the fabric whispered over my skin, I felt the old fairness settle. Deliver the work, don't chase the praise. I slipped the ring into my pocket so it could weight against my pulse. I checked the coin, still there, still heavy. The mirror coughed back my reflection with no embellishment. Good. I wanted to be seen clearly, even by people committed to blur. By the time I stepped into that chapel, I knew Patricia's weapon wasn't her insult. It was the crowd, and I planned to take it from her. At the rehearsal, the chapel sounded different. Emptier, every footstep too loud, every cough bouncing off wood. The air smelled like lemon polish and wilted roses left from a morning funeral. Sun through the high windows cut bars of light across the aisle. I traced one with my shoe, feeling leather nip my heel. Jason squeezed my hand once, a code we'd invented. With you. Patricia waited near the front pew, a queen inspecting a stage. Her pearls clicked softly when she turned her head. The hem of her blazer whispered as she pivoted to face me. She didn't bother with hello. "You're embarrassing the family," she said. "No dress, no grace, no class." The words landed like coins slapped on a counter. Sharp, cold, Transactional. I kept my breath slow, the way you do before throwing a breaker. No panic, just sequence. I smelled beeswax warming under the lights, a patient sweetness that made the insult seem smaller than it wanted to be. Then it's good this wedding isn't for the family, I said. She laughed, a small, brittle sound. Clients will be here. They can witness character? Character? Her eyebrow lifted like a gavel. You fix pipes. Engines, I said. Liv's ride on them. She stepped closer, the pearls ticking like a metronome. Wear a gown. I'll wear what I earned. Her eyes flicked to my shoulder boards, then away, dismissing. Play bride, not sailor. Jason started forward, but I touched his wrist. No. His pulse thudded once against my fingers, warm and steady and stilled. The pianist ran a scale that drifted into the rafters and dissolved. The priest, kind and tired, cleared his throat and pretended to study his notes, trying to be furniture. Patricia tilted so only I could hear. They're whispering, she said, about your career slip. What slip? My voice stayed level, but the air cooled a degree. She smiled without showing teeth. Demotion. Comes to those who pretend too long. The smell of lemon polish surged in my nose, suddenly chemical. I reached into my pocket and touched the ring, cool circle, edge smooth as a truth worn by time. I rolled it against my skin until the heat in my chest translated into control. That's a lie, I said. It's concern. She placed a hand dramatically over her pearls and the string clicked against her nails. People talk, I warn. You started it. She didn't deny it. Reputation is fragile. Mine is not. She flicked a glance over my whites. Theirs is, she said, chin darting toward the empty pews she had filled in her mind with people who fed on story. Spare us. I stepped half an inch closer. I don't work for you. Her gaze sharpened. You will always work for us. Our name is not my oath. The pianist coughed, startled by his own breath, and the sound skittered. Jason's hand pressed my spine, a grounding touch at the edge of the jacket's seam. Cloth rasped faintly against his palm. The priest pretended to find something urgent in the hymnal and turned pages that crackled like dry leaves. Patricia's phone buzzed, burr sharp in the quiet. She checked it with a practiced flick. People are confirming, she murmured, about the demotion, about the... What people? I asked. Useful ones. I pictured her contact list. Donors, clients, men who sent baskets instead of apologies. She'd slipped the rumor into those text threads like a drop of ink into water, watching it bloom. Heat climbed my neck, then broke. Training corralled it. This stops now, I said. Not until you apologize. For serving? I said. For truth? For spectacle. Her lips thinned. White as promise. You cheapen it. That was the line meant to gut me. It nicked. And then it missed. A year ago, in a place that smelled like hot copper and burned insulation, I had learned what white costs. My knuckles remembered heat, my throat remembered smoke, and my mind remembered 36 names I could still recite in order, like prayer, because writing them down in my head had been the only way to keep them from running off the ship as shadows. I focused on the present. Lemon, dust motes dancing in a slant of light, Jason's breath steady enough to borrow. I kept my words inside the 12 that mattered. White is earned when fires don't win. Her smile faltered. Poetry, she said, dismissing again what she couldn't control. Come to your senses. Wear a gown. The rehearsal marched on in awkward increments. The quartet tested canon in D, and the notes dropped like soft stones into a quiet pond. We walked the aisle twice. On the third pass, I saw the florist's assistant, a kid with green-stained fingers, glance at Patricia, then me, then swipe at his phone. The whisper had escaped the pews and gone digital. A rumor in a room is a match. On a phone, it's a wind. By evening, texts began pinging my mother. Are you okay? Is Emily? She forwarded 3, then stopped, ashamed of her relay. Jason and I sat on our couch, the fabric rough under my thighs, while the city's night air came through the cracked window smelling like rain and rubber. He handed me tea. The steam rose with a calm I envied. It's starting, I said. It's noise, he said. Noise can topple if no one steadies the beam. I sent one message to a person who understood beams. Sir, I typed. Heads up. Family rumor about demotion. It may land loud at the ceremony. I didn't ask for intervention. I didn't want rescue. I wanted the truth to have a witness ready if it needed legs. I put the phone face down on the coffee table. My challenge coin sat beside it, ridged edge catching light. I spun it once. The metal sang against wood, a small ring, then lay still. Morning came with a thin sun that made the city look honest. At the chapel, guests flowed in whispers and perfume, and a crisp of winter air that nipped my ears. Programs fluttered like small white flags, surrendering to gossip. I heard it before I stepped fully inside. Demoted. Misconduct. Poor thing. Should have worn a gown. Why uniform? Attention seeker. Words skimmed like flies. I kept moving. The jacket's lining slid cool over my shirt. The ring in my pocket warmed as if it could answer for me. I walked past a cluster of cousins. One, teeth too white, said under his breath, "Play-acting soldier." Another chuckled. My aunt's voice threaded between them, soft and lethal. She forgot her place. I felt my pulse climb, then click back into rhythm like a generator catching after a hiccup. Control held. The quartet began the prelude. Strings made the air feel brighter than it was. Candles exhaled faint heat that softened the chill. The flag by the choir loft stirred in a draft no one else seemed to feel. I took my position, square to the aisle, and let silence gather like charge. My hands trembled. Not fear. Fury trying to find a door. I pressed the ring between thumb and forefinger until the circle pushed a reminder into my skin. Promise. Service. Choose which room you answer to. The priest looked at me with pity he thought was kindness. I met his gaze until pity had to look away. Jason lifted his chin a fraction, an invitation to breathe with him. I followed. In 2-3, out 2-3. The air tasted like wax in winter. Behind us, the main doors groaned. A gust chased along the floor, lifting the hem of a child's coat and making the candles shiver. Heads turned. A new current entered, measured and undeniable, boot heels counting distance on stone. I didn't smile. Not yet. The truth wasn't in a hurry. It was punctual. It had walked through storms before. It knew how to make an entrance without asking permission. I felt the room pivot toward the doors, the rumor shrinking under a real shadow, and I understood. Her power lived in whispers, mine in the sound of one clean salute. The quartet's final chord hung, thin as glass, and broke when the doors swung wide. Cold air rushed in and made the candles gutter. Boot heels marked time on stone, measured, unhurried. The scent of brass polish threaded through lilies and wax. I felt the jacket sit heavier on my shoulders, as if the cloth understood hierarchy and decided to help. The Navy Honor Guard entered 2 by 2, rifles sloped, white gloves bright as winter sun. The flag led, blue field crisp, its edge lifting in the draft like a heartbeat. Heads turned in a wave. Whispers shortened, then snapped off. I could hear the tiny squeak of leather slings settling, the faintest chime of a buckle finding home. The chapel absorbed a new order, and for the first time that day, the room felt like a deck. Captain Adler followed, hat tucked, chin level. He stopped at the aisle's head and gave a slight nod to the priest, who looked both relieved and out of his depth. The captain's voice carried without effort, a clean line through wood and stained glass. "Father," he said, "official business." He inclined his head my way, and personal. The priest let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Captain Adler?" "Yes, sir." He faced the guests. "Lieutenant Commander Ward is not under demotion." He let the words land, one by one, like cleats biting a pier. Then, "She's under commendation." Gasps traveled the pews in a shiver. Fabric rustled. Someone's program slipped and flapped on the floor, paper slapping stone. I kept my spine straight. I felt the coin's ghost in my palm, though I hadn't touched it since morning. The ring in my pocket pressed a circle of warmth against my thigh, uniform, ring, align. Patricia's pearls clicked once. "Stunt," she breathed. Too soft for most, not soft enough for me. I didn't turn. The flag came forward to the chancel, and the scent of well cared for cotton drifted, a clean, sun dried smell that somehow beat the cold. The honor guard halted with a synchronized heel snap that rattled the pew's hymn racks. The sound felt like punctuation. A period, not a question. Captain Adler stepped beside me. He produced a velvet box from under his jacket. Navy blue, corners sharp, the kind of object that teaches hands to be respectful. He didn't open it. He held it out, the lid catching a stripe of colored light. Rubies from stained glass burned across the felt for a second and went out. "For heroism," he said. I took the box. The velvet was cool against my fingertips, nap brushing backward, then forward, like fur deciding to trust. The weight surprised me, denser than I'd expected, like truth condensed. I didn't look down yet. I kept my eyes forward because the room was watching, and some moments deserve a stillness. Beside the front pew, Patricia stood so quickly her bracelet chimed. "This is inappropriate," she said. 7 syllables, each trying to find a foothold. The captain didn't glance at her. "Ma'am," he said, a grade colder than before. "Noted." She lifted her chin. "Hijacking a wedding?" He cut her line with 3 words that held. "Correcting a lie." A murmur rippled, soft, adjusting, embarrassed at its complicity. I felt the heat at the back of my neck ebb, replaced by a steadier warmth that settled in my chest. The box sat in my hands like a quiet verdict. The priest seemed to retrieve his pastoral courage. "Captain," he said gently, "perhaps—" "2 minutes," the captain said. "Then I sit. Then we begin." The honor guard shifted a collective half-breath, and the sound of 8 boots adjusting a fraction filled the space like a held chord finding its next note. The candles steadied. The flag did not flutter. Silence agreed to listen. Patricia tried again, voice honed thin. "You all are making a scene." Jason finally spoke, tone low even. "We're making it right." Patricia's eyes snapped to him. "Stay in your lane." He didn't bite. He murmured for me alone, the air of his words warming the edge of my ear. "Breathe with me." I inhaled, wax and winter. Exhaled, steel and starch. The captain turned to me so only I could hear him. "Open it when you're ready," he said. "No rush." I nodded once. My gloves rasped against velvet. I eased the lid. The hinge whispered. Light found the metal's bronze gold face and struck fire. The Navy and Marine Corps Medal for Heroism lay in its blue cradle, ribbons striped in red, white, and blue, neat as duty. The smell of the box rose, a faint glue and fabric scent, new and ceremonial. I could almost taste copper, memory trying to creep in with its own footage. I kept it leashed. Not yet. Behind me, someone whispered, "Heroism?" The word reverent and surprised, as if they'd been offered a flavor they thought they hated and found it sweet. Patricia's voice snagged on the ribbon's colors. "She never—" "Boasted," the captain finished, not looking at her. I closed the box softly, careful not to make the moment sound like anything but what it was. My hand steadied fully, the tremor turned to an anchor. I faced the room. Pity had drained from eyes that didn't wear it well. A slow correction moved through shoulders, chins, breath. The captain addressed the guests again, words clean as cut rope. "Rumors slandered an officer." He let the sentence stand naked. "Truth owes her daylight." Patricia shook her head, mouth peeled back just enough to show strain. "This is theater." "Ma'am," he said, "this is service." She looked past him at me, banking on old leverage. "Emily, don't let them use you." "They didn't," I said. "I chose." The honor guard commander called softly. "Present. Arms." 8 rifles rose with the soft glide of wood on cloth and the final clack of precision. The sound braided with the low hum of the HVAC until the whole room seemed tuned to the same frequency. In that frequency, a particular brand of nonsense couldn't survive. The priest's face changed, less fluster, more witness. He nodded to me, a small bow of apology for what we'd endured to get here. My mother, hand at her throat, pressed a napkin to her lips, as if to hold in an exclamation she wanted to save for later. Her eyes shone. The light off them looked like water in sunlight. Jason leaned closer, breath a light touch. You okay? I am, I said. Now. Not triumphant, just aligned. Patricia sat, the air going out of her like a sigh from a punctured tire. The cushion exhaled under her, a soft hiss that made two people glance. She folded her hands so tight her knuckles blanched. The citrus scent of her perfume spiked, stress ringing it sharper. The captain's gaze swept the room. We'll speak of details once vows are made, he said. For now, know this. The only stain near this white was a lie. That gentle emphasis turned a few heads toward Patricia, without turning the moment into an indictment. Mercy, even here, even now. It takes rank to practice that without apology. He stepped back to his seat. The honor guard lowered rifles in a ripple and returned to parade rest, leather creaking softly. The flag's fringe settled, a last hushed shimmer. The quartet, brave again, lifted bows. The first note hovered, clear, sure. I slid the velvet box under my palm, anchoring it to the rail. The ring in my pocket pressed back, a counterweight. Two circles, one promise, one proof, balanced on a day that had tried to tip. Patricia leaned toward my mother, whispering something bitter and small. My mother didn't answer. She stood instead. The sound of her shoes on stone was hardly anything, but in that moment, it was a bell. Others rose with her, a low murmur turning into the soft thunder of bodies choosing respect. Stand, the room seemed to say, not yet full, not yet final, but practicing the posture truth requests. I felt my throat loosen. I let myself look at Jason. His smile wasn't wide, it was steady. The kind of smile you can build stairs on. Proceed? The priest asked, gentler now, as if he'd learned how to hold something fragile without breaking it. Proceed, I said. We began again, with the truth seated in the front pew, breathing calm. The rumor had no seat now. It hovered at the door, uninvited, discovering what cold really felt like. Behind us, a faint draft found the flag and lifted its edge for a second. Like a salute it couldn't help but return. I could feel the story tightening. Box closed, truth opened, and knew the next thing had to be said in full daylight. The quartet faded, bows hovering like held breath. Light from the stained glass slid across the rail and found the velvet box again, a steady flare. The room had learned to listen. You can hear it when listening arrives. The hush thickens, and even shoes stop creaking. Captain Adler stood, his chair whispered against stone. A moment, he said, voice level, and the sound carried to the rafters without strain. We owe one. He stepped forward, palms open. The honor guard straightened by a muscle's width. Wax and winter braided the air. I felt the cloth at my collar touch the place where pulse meets jaw. Steady now, counting time. Last year, he said, Pacific storms chewed our maps. He let the image fall, chewed, so people could feel spray without the sea. An electrical fire hit the destroyer's engine room. Smoke thick as wool, heat like a fist. The room tightened. Someone's bracelet ticked. A program crinkled. I could smell the memory before he said it. Burned insulation, hot copper, a taste that coats the back of the tongue. I kept my hands loose at my sides, palms a little damp, the ring's circle warm against my thigh through the pocket. Power died on deck too, he continued. Men trapped in dark, systems confused. He glanced at me once. Permission? Then back to the guests. Lieutenant Commander Ward went in. A soft intake of breath moved like a small surf line through bodies. Patricia's mouth pinched. Then she smoothed it, trying to erase surprise from her face. Her perfume sharpened, citrus knifing the lilies. She rerouted power, he said, through manual bypass rigs under live heat. His words shortened, the way they do when clarity matters. She used her body as bridge when the insulation failed. A low ripple, shock, respect, moved through the pews. My palms remembered the prickling dance of electricity, the stinging bite of air too hot to hold, the way a ship hums wrong when the grid goes sideways. I tasted metal that wasn't there. I breathed wax until the ghost hot faded. 36 sailors owed daylight to that choice, he said. She refused evacuation until every man was off the deck. A chair leg scraped, someone standing by mistake, then sitting again, embarrassed. The noise was small and human and kind. Patricia swallowed. Her voice came out thin. You never told us. Because real service doesn't need witnesses, I said. The captain nodded as if we'd rehearsed. We plan to honor her privately, he said, turning so the room could see his face. After vows. Keep the day about marriage, not medals. He lifted his chin toward the front pew, toward Patricia without naming her. But I heard a rumor walking faster than truth. His gaze found mine, then the room. So I moved the clock. That was the twist detonating. Simple, undeniable. Phones stilled. Even the HVAC seemed to quiet. The flag's fringe trembled once and settled. My aunt's hand fluttered. Her line came reflexive, clipped. This is manipulation. Correction, the captain said. Patricia's eyes cut to me. You staged this. I earned this, I said. Her lips thinned. To humiliate me. To free the room, I said. From your lie. The captain gestured to the box. Permission to cite the citation, ma'am? I nodded. He took the velvet, opened it with that soft hinge whisper. Light flared off bronze. He read, voice a shade warmer. Voice a shade. If for conspicuous heroism at risk of life? He didn't rush. Each clause landed, iron to wood. Directing casualty response under sustained threat. The words filled spaces smugness had occupied a minute earlier and pushed them out the doors. Jason's fingers brushed mine, quick. Tactile, true. His whisper barely moved air. There you are. Patricia tried one more time, thin and cutting. Pipes and grease. Hardly heroics. Pressure and fire, on, I said. Names change, risk doesn't. 8 words. Enough. The captain closed the box and handed it back. This white, he said, looking straight at my aunt, means courage. I didn't add anything to that line. Silence is the better half of certain sentences. The priest, eyes bright now, looked at the congregation. Something like shame, then pride, crossed more than one face. Jason turned, eyes shining with a kind of mischief that survives war. Permission to marry a legend? Granted, I said. Laughter broke, quick, relieved, clean. Not at anyone. With us? Patricia sat very straight, jaw set. Childish theatrics, she muttered. Grown truth, I said. The captain lifted his hand. The salute cracked the air, sharp perfection. The honor guard followed. 8 rifles lifted, stocks kissed by palms with a click you could feel in your sternum. The room rose, first a ripple, then a tide. Stand. Rows unfolded into feet, shoulders squared, heads high. The sound of 100 bodies standing is soft thunder, dignity waking up. I felt it hit, a physical wave, the moment when a story's spine snaps into alignment. The ring warmed like a small sun in my pocket. The uniform breathed with me, the flag lifted in its own answer. Patricia remained seated, a beat too long, then stood because isolation has a smell, and she recognized it at last. Her perfume turned faint, as if citrus surrenders to salt. The captain dropped the salute. He looked to the priest. Sir? Captain, the priest said, voice steady now. Thank you. He faced us, relief and reverence finally sharing space on his face. Shall we make this official? Jason's hand found mine. The contact was simple. Skin to skin, warm, alive. The quartet began again, confident now. Paschal Bell's repetitions felt like steps we could take without looking down. I turned to the front pew, my mother, tears silvering her lashes, my aunt, rigid as a mannequin, the captain, at ease but alert, the honor guard, statues holding breath. I let my eyes rest a second on the flag. Then I looked at the room. The same people who'd whispered a lie 30 minutes earlier, standing. Some held programs to chests. Some swallowed hard. A few nodded as if to themselves, slow, deliberate, promise-like. They mocked the uniform, I murmured to Jason, then stood for it. His mouth twitched. As they should. Patricia's final attempt came as we turned to the vows, a whisper meant to pierce. You'll tire of proving yourself. I stopped an hour ago, but I said. Stopped in truth's on duty now. The captain took his seat with a quiet creak of leather. The honor guard presented arms one last time, then rested. The priest cleared his throat, this time with confidence. The candles burned steady. Light found the metal again and held there like a blessing that wasn't about me alone, but about what we owe one another when fire eats the air. Dearly beloved, the priest began, and this time the words didn't feel like ceremony, more like oath. When our lips met, the rifles lifted and white gloves rose in salute, and I understood the payoff had shifted from defense to definition. The vows found their cadence, plain words polishing themselves against breath and intent. My voice didn't waver. Jason's hand was warm, a steadying heat through the thin cotton of his glove. The chapel smelled like wax and lilies and faintly brass, like the room had adopted the honor guard's discipline as a scent. By the power vested in me, the priest said, and the air around us thickened to a hush you could lean on. Sunlight pooled at our feet, a slow gold that made the stone look soft. You may kiss the bride. We did. No theatrics, no dip, just the press of two lives meeting at a pressure we'd already survived. The quartet struck a clean chord. Rifles lifted in unison, present arms, wood sliding on cloth with that soft final click. White gloves rose, palms slicing the air. A tiny echo bounced from the rafters. Even sound seemed to salute. Applause came, then stalled into something quieter, better. The stand held, as people realized their bodies had made a decision before their minds caught up. My mother wiped her eyes with a napkin that shook. The light made her tears look like a fine spray, sea salt in sunlight. She mouthed two words to me, so proud, and for once she didn't whisper them like contraband. Patricia stood, hands folded, jaw locked. She didn't clap. Her pearls were still. The citrus of her perfume thinned, as if the room's new air had diluted it. She stared at the flag, then at me, trying to chart a posture that didn't exist in any of her manuals. Silence fit her better than noise for the first time in a long time. We turned to face the congregation. The captain nodded once, a small private salute. The honor guard pivoted and marched the aisle, heels ticking against stone, until the flag reached the doors, where winter air licked the fringe. The doors sighed shut, the room warmed by a degree. Outside during the brief recessional lull, the chapel steps took on the chatter of relieved guests rediscovering their voices. Programs crackled, shoes scuffed. The sky wore a cold, clean blue. My jacket gathered sunlight and held it. The braid at my cuff felt cool against my wrist. People approached in ones and twos, apologies tucked into congratulations. We misjudged, one aunt said, cheeks coloring. Rumors travel, a cousin added, voice small. Truth arrives, I said. Eventually. Jason squeezed my fingers twice. Code for still with you. The ring on my hand, now where it belonged, caught light and threw it back onto my sleeve. A low flicker that moved when I did. My mother reached us first. She smelled like her old perfume, violet and powder, a gentler echo of youth. Her hands were damp when she took mine. I should have spoken sooner, she said, eyes bright. You spoke when it counted, I said. She nodded, swallowing. I'm proud, she repeated, louder this time. The word sat right in her mouth. It stayed. Patricia approached last. Her heels clicked once, then hesitated, as if stone had opinions. She stopped an arm's length away. Up close, her face looked less lacquered, the careful veneer lifted by weather she hadn't planned for. She glanced at the metal case peeking from beneath my bouquet, blue velvet dark as midnight, and then at the flag folding into a triangle in the honor guard's hands. I said you didn't deserve white, she said. 7 words, each pronounced like a pill she'd decided to swallow. I was wrong. Her voice didn't wobble. I respected that about her, even here. Admission costs more when you've invested in the error. I let the quiet hold us. The winter air knifed down the block and softened at the steps. The crowd behind her pretended to study the sky, giving us dignity's little distance. I lifted my chin an inch, enough to align breath and spine. I didn't wear it for your approval, I said. I wore it for theirs. I angled my bouquet so she could see what theirs meant. The honor guard folding the flag with geometries that locate meaning inside angles. The captain standing at ease, eyes on the door like a sentinel off duty, but never off watch. Jason beside me, ring bright as a star you can find even in city light. My mother, hand over her heart, not to pledge, but to steady feeling. Patricia's mouth opened, closed. She nodded. One, short, clean. Congratulations, she said. Two syllables performing penance. She reached as if to touch my sleeve, then thought better of it. You held the room. A hint of respect hid in the compliment like a contraband coin. I held my ground, I said. She breathed out. The citrus eased, winter air replaced it. That too. The captain stepped closer, offering the velvet box properly now that applause had learned manners. For the record, he said, voice private under the public noise. This was overdue. I took the box. The nap of the velvet brushed my glove, soft, directional. The metal inside pulsed with no light of its own, but borrowed every sun strand greedily. Thank you, sir. Bring it to the reception or save it for home, he said. Your call. Home, I said. Where it can remind, not perform. He smiled. Sound choice. Guests drifted to the curb where a line of cars idled, exhaust curling in slow ghosts. The chauffeur opened our door, leather smelled warm and faintly sweet. Jason helped me in, then slid beside me, his thigh solid against mine, our uniforms creasing into each other like origami learning a new shape. He brushed a stray petal from my lap. You okay? I am, I said, and not because of them. He kissed my knuckles. Because of us. The car pulled away. I watched the chapel recede in the rear window until it became a white thumbprint against winter brick. The flag triangle rode on my lap for a moment, weighty, precise, before I set it on the seat between us like a third vow neither of us needed to speak. We drove toward the reception, engine humming a pleasant, well-tuned note. The city's cold air slipped in through a vent, rinsing out the last of the citrus and leaving only leather and a hint of Jason's aftershave. Clean, medicinal, him. I slid the metal case into my bag. The ring flashed once as it went. Uniform, ring. 2 fixed points, steady as stars. I rested my head back, letting the collar press the warm place below my jaw. For the first time that day, I felt tired in a way that promised rest, not collapse. Behind us, I imagined Patricia standing in the chapel doorway, learning how silence can be a proper answer, too. At home, I knew exactly where the medal would hang and what it would keep company with. Weeks later, the house learned a new quiet. Not the hush of holding breath, but the kind that comes after a storm decides you've passed its test. Morning light found the frame on the mantel. Our wedding photo, uniforms bright as frost, Jason's hand over mine, the flag triangle crisp on a nearby table. The caption in Navy Times lay on the coffee table beneath it, paper faintly inky under my thumb. Honor in white, a love that serves. The radiator ticked a steady rhythm along the baseboard, soft metal notes counting time more kindly than deck alarms ever had. Coffee breathed from the kitchen. Dark, bitter, dependable. I stood in shirt sleeves, my dress whites sheathed in their bag on the closet door, cloth whispering when I brushed past. The ring warmed around my finger, a small sun that never set. I took the metal from its velvet cradle and hung it on the wall beside the photo. The nail bit wood with a modest squeak. Bronze settled against paint with a padded clink. No spotlight, no flourish. Just where it belonged. Near the picture that explained its point better than any caption. 2 people choosing an oath that made room for both of us. My mother visited that afternoon, hands wrapped around a paper cup that steamed up her glasses. I brought pastries, she said, and the bag sighed open, butter and sugar puffing into the room. She stood in front of the mantel for a long time, eyes flicking, photo, medal, flag, like she'd found a grammar she could finally speak. I like it there, she said. It's a reminder, I said, not a trophy. She nodded. Still proud, she added, louder again, and it settled in the air like furniture. We mailed thank you notes at the kitchen table, stamps tasting like glue and nostalgia. Jason's cursive leaned like it wanted to run and couldn't. Mine printed steady, mechanic neat. He nudged my shin with his knee. You realize the captain's 2 minutes was the cleanest ambush I've ever seen? I smiled into my mug. He corrected the clock. And you corrected the room, he said. He reached over, slid his thumb over my ring, and the gold flashed once. Tiny, disciplined lightning. We moved on to the next envelope like the world was just correspondence and care. Patricia called a week later. No preamble, just her voice trimmed down to purpose. I read the article, she said, and the comments. Comments are a weather report, I said. I trust barometers more. A breath, then. I won't repeat the story I told. She chose each word like a plank. I'll correct it when I hear it. Good, I said. No gloating, no extra. She had found the line and decided to stand on the right side of it. That was the work. She paused. The photo is strong. It's us, I said. Yes, she said. And for the first time since I was a kid trying to take apart a clock to see how the hands found noon, I heard respect arrive without an invoice. When she came by months later to return a dish my mother had loaned her, she stood in the doorway and took in the wall again. Her perfume was gentler, citrus tempered by something clean. She put the dish down and straightened, not out of habit, but in answer to the flag triangle on the bookshelf. You kept it close, she said. It keeps me close, I answered. Spring moved in. The street smelled like wet concrete and new leaves. Jason and I learned the choreography of the small house. His boots by the door, my jacket aired and rehung, a coin and ring tossed into a ceramic tray where they clinked together each evening like friends. On Sundays, I'd polish the metal lightly with a cloth that carried the faint scent of lemon oil, and it would lift a little, as if remembering light. I thought of the chapel each time, the moment when the room stood, because truth asked it to, not because a program told it when. Sometimes in the early hours when the building settled and the city's hum thinned to a wire, I'd wake to the memory of heat and the color white going very bright, and I'd lay my palm flat on the wall beneath the metal, feeling cool paint on skin until the old heat dissolved. Then I'd curl my hand under the pillow and find Jason's, warm and unconcerned, and sleep would return like a tide. The captain sent a postcard from a pier in another port. Sun hashed the water in silver slivers. Keep your screws true, he wrote. They hold what people think holds itself. I pinned it near the photo with a magnet shaped like a little anchor that didn't have to be clever to do its job. On a random Tuesday, a neighbor I barely knew, teacher, quiet, caught me in the hallway. She smelled like chalk and damp wool. Saw the article, she said. My kids read it. We talked about work and worth. Thank you, I said, surprised at the way gratitude can feel like release instead of debt. It mattered, she said. The white, what it meant. It means courage, I said. At night, we kept the mantel lamp low. The metal's edge caught it. The ring took a little for itself. The photo held both and gave them back to us without drama. I liked the arrangement. Promise beside proof, proof beside promise. Neither competing, both insisting gently on a standard. I didn't argue with rooms anymore. If a space didn't know how to hold what I carried, I brought my own frame. The day of the chapel had taught me that crowds are weather and courage is climate. Weather flares, climate holds. When invitations came, galas, family fundraisers, events where white tablecloths hoped to outshine white uniforms, I accepted or declined without explaining. If I went, I stood with my back straight and my ring steady, and people adjusted. If I didn't, the house still felt like a room that understood me better than any chandeliered hall. The radiator ticked. The coffee breathed. The coin and ring clinked once in their tray and went still. I kept a copy of Navy Times folded inside an engineering manual on the bookshelf. Not to reread the words, but to remember the sequence. Rumor, correction, stand. The sequence worked on other problems too. At work, at family dinners, inside my own head, when the old training to accommodate tried to draft me again. On the anniversary, Jason and I stood in front of the mantel in shirt sleeves, hands laced. Outside, the city exhaled warm air that smelled faintly of cut grass. Inside, the metal hung quiet. The photo showed us still standing right where we had been when truth took the microphone and didn't raise its voice. I'm glad we wore them, he said. So am I said. The ring pressed its circle against my skin. The uniform in the closet whispered when a breeze from the open window moved the garment bag. Somewhere down the block, a flag lifted and settled, unseen, answering a wind you only notice if you've learned to listen. I looked at the wall, metal, photo, flag, and felt the day return without sting. Not performance, not proof, reminder, anchor, oath. They had mocked the uniform, it had taught them posture. And in the mirror above the mantel, I recognized the quiet of a life aligned with its own weight. They mocked the uniform until it stood taller than pride. Subscribe now. When you've been shamed for your choices, come stand where truth stands tall.